Welcome back, everyone, and if this is your first time here, you are jumping straight into part 2 of a very intense story. Before you go any further, go watch part 1 first. The link will be pinned in the comments section, and you are going to need everything that happened there to fully feel what is coming in this part. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now because you do not want to miss a single upload. Alright, let's get back to Amara and Ji-woo. Buckle up. She couldn't sleep. 3 weeks since the Sunday at the marina, and Amara had reorganized her entire life around avoidance. Different pharmacy, different market, a new breakfast spot she'd found on the mainland where she was reasonably confident no one would be waiting at a table 2 rows away, looking at her with the measured attention of a man who had already decided how the story ended. She was lying on her back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, doing the thing she had promised herself she would stop doing, replaying it. The kiss, the weight of his hand on her jaw, his voice in the hotel corridor in the glass office across the market table. You don't get to walk away from me, because you walked away, you're the only one who ever has. She turned onto her side. She pulled the pillow over her head. She counted backward from 100 in Yoruba, which usually worked, and tonight did absolutely nothing. The problem, and she had identified this problem with the precision of someone who had been arguing with herself about it for weeks, was that fear and fascination were using the same pathways in her brain, and she could not consistently tell them apart. When she thought about Ji-woo Kang, she felt a contraction in her chest that was absolutely terror. She also felt something that was absolutely not terror and was considerably harder to justify. She sat up. She turned on the lamp. She picked up her phone and set it down without opening it. It together, she told herself. In the morning she got it together enough to go to work and function at approximately 80% capacity, which her boss did not notice because Mr. Taewo was in the middle of a complicated negotiation with a supplier in Incheon and had tunnel vision, Incheon, South Korea. She typed the word into a client document and then stared at it for too long. She deleted it, retyped it, stared at it again. She closed the document entirely and opened a different one and told herself she was absolutely fine. She was not fine. The thing about Ji-woo Kang that she had not accounted for was that he had not become smaller with distance. Most things did. Most things, when you put enough space between yourself and them, began to lose their edges, began to soften into something manageable. She had counted on that. She had built her entire 3-week strategy on that basic principle. He had not gotten smaller. If anything, the silence he had settled into was larger than his presence had been, because when he was showing up, the SUVs, the flowers, the new lock, the Sunday at the marina, she had something to push against. She could be angry. She could be certain. She could stand on the solid ground of her own resistance and know exactly where she stood. Now there was nothing to push against, and she was discovering, uncomfortably, that some part of her had been oriented toward him even in opposition. And without the opposition, she didn't quite know which direction she was facing. She filed that realization under things to think about never and went back to work. Chisum came by that Friday. She brought wine and moin from the woman on the ground floor who made it the right way with enough pepper, and she sat on Amara's kitchen counter like she always did and looked at Amara like she was a document she was trying to read. "He's still around?" she asked. "He's not around," Amara said. "I haven't seen him in 3 weeks." "Nothing, Amara." "Chisum," I said, but nothing. Chisum ate a piece of moin and said nothing and waited, because she had known Amara for 11 years and understood that waiting was frequently more productive than asking. "He's not doing anything dramatic anymore," Amara said eventually against her own intentions. "No cars outside the office, no flowers, no nothing, and it's worse." Chisum tilted her head. "Worse how? Because when he was showing up I could be angry, I had something to push against." She poured herself more wine than was strictly necessary. "Now there's just silence, and I keep waiting for the silence to do something, and it doesn't, and I can't tell if he's gone or if he's just watching from further away, and either way I can't stop thinking about it." Chisum was quiet for a moment. Then, "You like him?" "I'm afraid of him." "Both things can be true simultaneously, Amara. Both things should not be true simultaneously. One of those things should win." "Which one do you want to win?" Amara drank her wine. She looked at the window. Outside, the island was doing what it did on Friday nights, alive and bright and moving. She thought about what she wanted very carefully, the way you think about a question when you know the honest answer and are not sure you're ready to say it out loud. "The fear won," she said finally. Chisum's expression said everything she had the grace not to say. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not looking at you like anything. You have a very specific face right now. This is just my face, Amara. It is not just your face. It is your face that means you have already decided something and you are waiting for me to catch up." Chisum picked up her glass. I just think, she said carefully, that a woman who is successfully not thinking about someone does not reorganize her route to work 7 times in 3 weeks. Amara opened her mouth, closed it. I hate you, she said. You love me, Chisum said pleasantly. And you like him. Both things can be true simultaneously. After Chisum left, Amara sat at her window for a long time. The island moved outside in its Friday brightness, and she tried to locate the clean certainty she had felt walking out of that hotel 3 weeks ago. She looked for it carefully, checked all the places she had left it. It wasn't there anymore. The next week was ordinary, and the week after that. And Amara began to breathe again, began to stop scanning the street before she walked out of her office building, began to rebuild the sense that her life was her own. She should have known that the absence of visible pressure was not the same thing as being left alone. The first sign was small. Her colleague Bissy mentioned casually that someone had been asking about her. A man, well-dressed, came by reception on the ground floor asking if Amara Okafor worked in the building. The receptionist had said she couldn't confirm or deny. Bissy mentioned it as light gossip, nothing serious. Amara said it was probably nothing, smiled, went back to her desk, and felt something cold move through her. The second sign was the car, not Ji-woo's car. Different. A grey sedan she clocked outside her building on a Tuesday evening, then outside the pharmacy on Thursday, then outside the church where she went with her mother on Saturday. Different driver each time. No pattern she could point to definitively. But she had gotten good at pattern recognition in the last month, and the grey sedan was a pattern. She almost called Ji-woo. She sat with her phone in her hand for 20 minutes, the contact saved under no name, just a number she had memorized without meaning to, and thought about what calling him would mean, what it would cost, what door it would open. She didn't call. She told herself it was nothing. On Wednesday of the following week she was walking from the bus stop to her office when a man fell into step beside her. He wasn't suited. That was what made her uncertain for a beat too long. He looked ordinary. Mid-30s, regular clothes, hands in his pockets. He said her name quietly and she looked at him, and the look in his eyes was not something she had calibrated for. Tell Kang, the man said very quietly, almost pleasantly, that things that belong to him have a way of getting broken. She kept walking. She didn't know how. Her legs did it without instruction. He peeled off and was gone before she had processed the full sentence, and she walked the remaining 3 minutes to her office with the words settling through her like sediment in still water, sinking slowly until they hit the bottom. Things that belonged to him. She was at her desk with the door closed and her hands flat on the surface and her breathing very deliberate when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered before she had decided to. Are you inside? Ji-woo's voice. Quiet, controlled. But underneath the control something, a frequency she hadn't heard before. How did you? She stopped. Yes, I'm inside. There until I send someone. Ji-woo, what just happened? Who was that man? Stay inside, Amara. Tell me what is happening. I will explain everything. A pause, and in it she heard something she had not heard from him before, not quite emotion but the suppressed evidence of it, like a current running under ice. I need you to trust me for 40 minutes. She laughed and it came out wrong, too sharp. You need me to trust you? Based on what? She asked. Based on what history exactly should I trust you? Silence on the line, and then very quietly, based on the fact that I know who sent him and I know what he's capable of, and I'm 40 minutes away. A beat. Please, he said. She had never heard that word from him before. It arrived so quietly she almost missed it, and it landed in her chest like something dropped into still water, sending rings outward in every direction. She stayed inside. He arrived in 35 minutes. He came up himself. Not a guard, not a representative, him, in a dark suit with the jacket unbuttoned, and his bearing slightly altered in a way she couldn't immediately name. He stood in the doorway, and the first thing he did before he said a word was look at her. Just look. The full length of the office between them, and he stood there and looked at her the way you look at something you were not certain would still be there. You're not hurt, he said. He just talked. Something moved across Ji-woo's face. There and gone in under a second, but she caught it, the controlled release of something that had been held at enormous tension. Not relief exactly, something older than relief. He closed the door. He didn't sit. He stood with his back to it and looked at her. Who was he? She asked. A message, he said. From someone who wants me to understand that my connections are visible. She processed that. Connections, that's what I am. He didn't answer immediately, and in the silence she watched something happen in his face, the word connection sitting wrong with him, landing inaccurately, and him knowing it. Am I in danger? She asked. You were approached. That's not nothing, but it was a message, not an action. What's the difference? The difference is significant, and I intend for it to remain so. She stood up and came around the desk and stopped in front of him, close enough to look up and hold his gaze, and she was tired enough and frightened enough that she had stopped editing herself entirely. "This is what I told you," she said. "Didn't I stand in front of you on that street and tell you that this wasn't attention, it was control, and that being near you put me in danger? Didn't I say that? You said that. You said no anyway. Yes, now a man knows my name and my office and which church I attend with my mother on Saturdays." Her voice cracked on the last part and she let it crack. "My mother, Ji-woo, she is 61 years old." Something happened in his face at that. Not the small controlled things she had learned to read, something larger, moving through his jaw and his eyes in a way that was brief but unmistakable. The first time she had seen something genuinely get through the glass. "She has been protected since the first week," he said. Amara stared at him. "Since the first," she stopped. "You've had someone watching my mother since the beginning without telling me." "That is exactly what I mean," she said, and her voice was very quiet now, which was worse than when it was loud. "That is exactly the problem, Ji-woo. You make decisions about my life, about the people I love, without telling me. Without asking me. You decide what I need and you provide it, and you don't tell me because telling me would mean giving me information that gives me power, and you can't." She stopped. Her throat was tight. "You cannot seem to exist in a space where I have equal footing, and I understand that is who you are and how you have always operated, and I understand that in your world it probably keeps people safe. But I am not one of your operations. I am a person. And I have spent weeks being managed, and I am done with it." He was listening. She could see that he was really listening, not preparing a response, not calculating an angle, just receiving every word she was saying with an attention that was almost painful in its completeness. "What happens now?" she asked. "Take you somewhere safe until this is handled." She nodded slowly. She picked up her bag and she walked to the door, not toward him. Not toward his car or his tower or his guards or the expensive silent apartment with the view of the water. She walked to the office door and opened it and looked back at him once. "Handle it," she said. "I hope you stay safe, I genuinely mean that." She held his gaze. "But I'm going home, Ji-woo, my own home, and I need you to let me." He stood very still. For a moment she thought he would say no. She had braced for it, the old reflex, the calm, immovable certainty of a man who did not accept outcomes he hadn't approved. She watched him and she waited, and she held the door open and she did not flinch. He stepped back, one step, away from the door, away from her path, and he said nothing, and he did not reach for his phone to have someone follow her, and he did not move. He simply stood in the middle of her office and watched her go with an expression she had never seen on his face before and couldn't immediately name. She left. She walked down the stairs because she didn't want to wait for the elevator, and she walked out of the building into the Lagos afternoon heat, and she got into a cab and gave her address and sat in the back seat with her bag in her lap and her hands completely still and her eyes looking straight ahead. She did not cry. She went home and she changed her clothes and she made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink, and she sat on her sofa in the quiet of her apartment and felt the particular weight of a decision that was clean and right and still cost something. She had walked away, this time for real. Here is what we need to know right now, and be honest in the comments. Do you think Ji-woo is going to let her go, or is something about to change that nobody saw coming? Tell us below and keep watching because this is not over yet. 3 days passed, no cars outside her building, no calls from unknown numbers, no flowers, no messages, no men in suits materializing on the pavement, nothing. Lagos went about its business around her, and Amara went about hers, work, market, Chisum on the phone, her mother on Saturday. She told herself this was what she had wanted. This was the outcome she had been trying to engineer for weeks. The silence, the space, the clean, uninterrupted continuation of her own life. She told herself this was good. On the 4th day Chisum came by again unannounced with no wine this time, just herself, which meant it was serious. "He came to see me," Chisum said. Amara set down her cup very carefully. "Who? You know who?" Silence in the apartment was complete. "He came to your house," Amara said. "He came to the office. He waited in the lobby for 40 minutes until I came down." Chisum sat across from her with her hands folded and her expression unusually measured. "He didn't ask me where you were. He didn't ask me to talk to you on his behalf. He didn't ask me anything." "Then what did he want?" Chisum looked at her steadily. "He asked me one question. He said, was she ever actually afraid of me, or was she afraid of what she felt?" The apartment was very quiet. "And what did you say?" Amara asked, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I told him that was a question he needed to ask you himself." Chisum paused. "And then he said something that I think you need to hear." Amara waited. "He said I have spent my whole life making sure nothing was outside my control, and I told myself that was protection. I told myself that keeping things close and keeping things managed was how you kept people safe, and I did it to her, and she left." And she was right to leave. Chisum held her gaze. He said it standing in the lobby of my office building, Amara, a man like that, saying those words out loud to a woman he had never met. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't working an angle. He just needed to say it out loud to someone who knew you. Amara pressed her lips together. He also said, Chisum continued quietly, that he understood if it was done, that he was not going to show up again. That the choice was yours and he was going to leave it there. She paused. He looked terrible, by the way, like he hadn't slept. Amara stood up. She went to the window and looked out at the street below, the ordinary, familiar, uncomplicated street, and she stood there and felt the shape of everything with a clarity she hadn't expected. Not the frightened clarity of the last few weeks, not the brittle, determined clarity of a woman trying to hold her position. Something quieter. Something that felt for the first time like the truth of the whole thing, seen from far enough away to see all of it. He had let her go. After everything, after the wrist and the kiss and the no and the SUVs and the lock on her door and the Sunday at the marina and all of it. When she had looked at him and walked toward the door, he had stepped back. He had let her walk. And then he had gone to her best friend, not to manipulate the situation, but to say out loud the thing he had not been able to say to her face. Control is not love, he had said it. In his own words, in his own way, to the one person who would make sure she knew. She turned from the window. Where is he? She asked. Chisum looked at her for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and put a folded piece of paper on the table. He left that, she said. Just in case. The address was a place she didn't know, not the tower, not the glass office in Victoria Island, not any of the architecture of his power. It was a small building near the water in a quiet part of the island, the kind of place that had no guards visible outside, no black SUVs at the curb, no statement being made. She stood outside it for a moment, then she went in. He was inside. No jacket, no suit armor, just a dark shirt and trousers, sitting at a plain table with nothing on it, in a room that was almost empty. No desk between them, no guards at the walls, no managed distance. Just a man in a room, and he looked up when she walked in, and the expression on his face when he saw her was something she felt in the center of her chest, like a struck chord. She stood across the table from him. She looked at him for a long moment, and he let her look, didn't fill the silence, didn't manage it, just sat in it and let her see him. Chisum told me what you said, she said. He nodded once. Did you mean it? Yes, of it, because I need you to understand what I'm asking. I'm not asking if you meant it in this room right now. I'm asking if you understand it. If you actually understand that what you did, the lock, the surveillance, the deciding for me, that none of that was protection, that all of it was about you needing to feel in control of something that scared you. Do you understand the difference? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice was different from every other time she had heard it, no floor under it, no architecture holding it up, just the plain, unmanaged sound of a man saying the truth. I have run things since I was 19 years old, he said. I have never been in a situation I couldn't manage or a variable I couldn't account for. And then I met you and you left in the morning and I felt, he stopped. His jaw moved. I felt something I didn't have a name for, and I handled it the only way I knew how to handle things. I controlled it, I controlled you, and I told myself it was because I wanted you safe. He looked at her directly. But you're right. It was because I was afraid, and I didn't know how to be afraid. So I turned it into something I knew how to do instead. The room was very still. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me, she said. I know. Didn't you say it before I left? Because I didn't understand it before you left. His voice was level, but underneath it something enormous was being held carefully. When you walked out of my office and I let you go, when I actually let you go instead of when I stood there and watched you leave and didn't stop you, something happened that I don't have better words for than this. I understood for the first time the difference between holding something and keeping it. He paused. You cannot keep a person, Amara. I knew that intellectually. I didn't know it here. He touched his chest briefly once. Until I watched you walk away and I felt what I had actually been doing. She stood across the table from him and felt the full weight of the last several weeks, the fear and the anger and the pull and the resistance and the sleepless nights and the reorganized routes and the thrown-away flowers and all of it, felt all of it simultaneously without trying to resolve it into something simpler, and she found that she could hold it, all of it, without being crushed by it. Chisum had been right. Both things could be true simultaneously. She could know exactly what he was and what he had done and still feel the truth of what was between them, not despite the difficulty of it, but as a complete and honest picture of it. She came around the table. She stopped in front of him and he looked up at her from where he sat, and for once in the entire time she had known him, he was the one looking up, and she was the one deciding, and they both understood the significance of that arrangement. I have conditions, she said. He held her gaze. Tell me. No more decisions made about my life without my knowledge. Not about me, not about my mother, not about anything that concerns me. If there is danger, I need to know about it. If there is something you have arranged that involves me, I need to know about it. Full information. Always. Yes, he said. I am not one of your operations. I don't get managed. I don't get handled. If you have a problem with something I'm doing, you tell me directly, like a person talking to another person. And if I ever feel like I am being controlled again, if I ever feel like you are making me smaller to make yourself feel safer, I will leave. And you will not follow, and it will be finished. She held his gaze without wavering. Can you do that? Not today, not when it's easy. Can you actually do that? He was quiet for a moment. And she understood that the quietness was not evasion. It was the quietness of a man taking a serious question seriously, weighing it honestly instead of answering quickly. I don't know, he said finally. I know what I want to say. I know who I want to be with you. But I also know what I am and what I've been, and I think you deserve an honest answer more than you deserve a clean one. He paused. What I can tell you is that I understand now what I didn't understand before. And that understanding cost me something real, and I don't want to lose it again. It was not the perfect answer. It was the true one. She reached out and put her hand on his jaw, her palm against the sharp angle of it, the warmth of his skin, the slight tension in his face as he held still and let her touch him without reaching for her, without taking, without controlling, just receiving, just letting her decide what the moment was. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said quietly. He closed his eyes briefly, just briefly, and when he opened them again she was still there, and something in his face rearranged itself into something she had never seen before, something open and unguarded and entirely real. He raised his hand and covered hers where it rested on his jaw, not gripping, not holding in place, just there, present, the way she had needed him to be from the beginning and hadn't known how to ask for. I'm not afraid of you, she said. Not the way she had said it in the glass office, not as defiance, as a fact, as something that was simply and finally true. I know, he said, but I will leave if I need to. I know that too, he said, and this time I won't stop you. He paused, but I hope you won't need to. She stood in that plain, quiet room near the water with her hand on his face, and the whole complicated truth of the thing between them held clearly in both their eyes, and she thought that this was not the story she would have written for herself. She was a 24-year-old woman with a degree and a job and a small apartment she kept organized, and she had not come looking for any of this. But she was here, on her own terms, with her eyes open, standing in her own power, and she had chosen to be. That felt like everything. Outside, Lagos moved in its enormous indifferent brightness, carrying on with the business of being itself. The water was close. She could hear it through the window, the soft, persistent sound of something that had been moving long before either of them existed and would keep moving long after. She was still standing. She had set the terms. And for the first time since the morning she walked out of a hotel room thinking she was leaving a stranger behind, everything was exactly as it should be. And that is the real ending of part 2. If this story gave you everything you needed, please like this video right now. It means the world to us. Subscribe so you never miss a story we drop. And tell us in the comments, did Amara handle that the way you hoped she would? Was Ji-woo's change convincing? And where in the world are you watching from right now? We will read every single comment, and we will see you in the next one.